you have to understand that, you have to get those results. You make certain that those results are going to give you some data, because without the data, without a successful process where you take it all the way and you say, okay, well, I'm going to grind it out a bit. I'm going to look at my information and see where the success lies. If you can't get any success at all, then you obviously have something wrong with your process. But in terms of a flag, that's one flag. There's no success. I mean, none at all. And you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Either you're not doing everything you're supposed to be doing, or you're doing something wrong. That's a flag. Or your market has provided you your success, and you look at it and you say, wow, based on this, certain pieces of my business are just not sustainable for me. But if I take a look at the data and say, this part of it is, that's my process, because I know with that piece of that information, I can actually, move forward, then you have your, non-flag, as opposed to a flag saying, hey, pay attention, this is not working. Because you have different pieces of your business, you have different pieces of marketing, you have different pieces that are bringing, essentially things that are bringing everything into the funnel. You have to understand which pieces of those work. There are certain markets that you do great in, say direct mail, versus others you don't. You have other markets you do great in, say text message, and others you don't. So you have to understand which ones are going to be flags for you in terms of actually producing results and which are not. Those are the flags you want to look out for. If you're putting out way more, then you're getting back in. And again, depending on your market, that could be a very hard number to put your finger on, because you have to be able to have the wherewithal to get to a successful transaction in order to have data to measure. Let me know if that makes sense, because I want to make certain that's clear. You have to be able to take the stomaching of getting to that success, and obviously you want a guide, such as myself or other investors that have done what you're looking to do. But obviously you want to have that guide to say, well, yes, you're doing the right things. Let's take a look at the data. Let's figure out exactly what we need to adjust to make this flag go away, essentially. Let's figure out where this little red piece, stuck in all the blues of your puzzle, needs to move to. And so really quickly, for those joining us late, my name is Kevin Davis, and we are talking about key performance indicators, understanding the health of your business. You're joining us on the Deal Mastery Monday night calls, where we discuss strategies, techniques, information that'll help your business get to the next level, get you the next deal done. Head over to dealmastery.com for more information. All right, so let's see, we have a couple quick questions here. It does make sense. How long do you usually recommend collecting data, from Andrew? So Andrew, depending on your market, you actually want to understand your market. So you do a market analysis prior to, so you understand, okay, well, how much activity is happening here? Because in a market with not much activity, it may take a ton of effort to even get something. Or a market with a lot of activity may make a lot more because there's so much competition. It really depends. But you do want to understand, you want to collect some data from the forefront. So you can do so in stages. So you understand, okay, well, I may not know what it takes to close a deal, but how much does it take for me to actually get leads in? Okay, based on how many leads I've gotten in, how many of them have I actually been able to present offers to actually motivated people? Okay, and then you take that step by step and take a look at it and say, okay, well, we're building out the data as we go. Now, if you get to a bottleneck where you say, okay, well, I've essentially made all of these offers and not one of them has ever been accepted, I would take that data, and that's data as well, because you can say, let me go back and say, okay, well, these people were, somewhat, interested in selling. Let's figure out what they sold for, and maybe my analysis is off, and I may have missed something in the market that says now, hey, I can go up to 75% as opposed to the 60%, minus repairs and such. So that is where you can make the adjustments, but you have to have some data to work with. I hope that makes sense to you, Andrew. And let's see, Lena had a follow-up question. Understood, but if you're putting out more than you're receiving, what do you do next to adjust. I think I just addressed that, but I want to be clear. Take a look at the data. The data is not going to lie. Either you don't have enough run of data, meaning it's not enough data to be able to analyze, or there's some hole in that process that's saying, hey, maybe we need to tweak this part, or even, quite honestly, it may be, and I know, you're in DC, which is extremely competitive. Sometimes we have to take a look and say, well, can I do what I need to do in order to make this happen? Because I can't necessarily, let's say in some markets, maybe they'll say, yeah, I can go negative equity for a second, where it may not make sense for you. But if you look back at the deals that you may have lost, the deals that you didn't get, and say, okay, well, if I look and say, hey, these actually closed, what numbers were they at, then at least, because if you've gotten up to bat, if you've swung out consistently, you've never gotten on base, meaning you've never gotten that contract, then there's something wrong with that batting swing. You got to figure out, okay, well, am I swinging with the right numbers? Am I not a closer? Am I a person who I shouldn't be actually making my offers because I'm not good at that? And that's the reason why, I'm not getting this thing done. You can collect that data and figure out where your bottleneck is and then make the adjustment there. That's where I would say, Lena, is what you should do next. To figure out from the data that you have where that bottleneck is, whether it's a personnel issue, whether it's a system issue, whether it's a process issue. You take that bottleneck and then you try and fix that, and everything else should open up. All right. Let me guys know if you have any additional questions. We're going to continue to move forward here. We want to definitely get to the Q&A. But great questions, guys. Keep them coming. All right. So next, we want to understand our ideal pipeline. What we're building is the flow. We want to make certain we understand and control that flow. We don't want that up and down, tumultuous, not knowing when the next deal is going to close or what have you, or the other things that go along. We want to control the flow because we want to know, how many suspects do we need to speak to in order to get to the real prospects that are qualified and closable. You see the funnel there. It's all about the funnel because we absolutely will have a lot of suspects. If you're doing the right marketing, you're generating a lot of leads. There's some interest. There may not be a ton of interest. There may be some, maybe a lot. It really depends on the type of marketing and what pool of marketing pieces you're doing. But ultimately, in order to control your income, you have to control that flow. You absolutely have to make certain that the flow of leads is coming into your pipeline, flushing out the suspects, dealing with the prospects, qualifying the right ones, and trying to close on them. So we can't understand how many suspects we need in order to get to prospects unless we measure. We don't understand how many prospects we need to speak to get to the really qualified ones unless we measure. We don't understand how to get to the closable ones or how many we can get to out of the qualified ones unless we measure. Because what we can do from that is plan forward. Because now we have that data again, and we can actually take that data and say, all right, well, I know 5 + 5 = 10. So if I do, 5 leads, 5, cold call leads plus 5 website leads, it's going to give me, 10 offers. And I know based on those 10 offers, from those channels, I can get 1 deal done. We can properly plan. So now we say, all right, well, instead of me making 10 cold calls or 5 cold calls, I'm going to make, 10 or whatever the numbers are. We want to be able to plan forward because then we can control that flow. We can go back and control the actual flow of leads coming in to make certain that we have enough leads to get enough offers, to get enough deals. We can't do it without the data. Unless you have a data source that's already in the market, already generating, that will provide you that. And then, unless you're actually duplicating exactly what they're doing, still a hit and miss. We have to be able to make sure we control that flow. We have to understand we control that data, how much we put into it in order to get what we need out but we have to measure in order to do so. For those that are just joining us, again, my name is Kevin Davis on our Deal Mastery Monday call, talking about key performance indicators, measuring the health of your deal flow. Each and every Monday, we cover the strategies, techniques, and process to help your investors achieve their goals. Head over to dealmastery.com for more information. All right, let's talk about the lead generation, because this is where we start our, or we typically we start our measurement. Because we're going to know, based on your marketing, how many calls, ads, text messages, voicemails, how many door knocks. I mean, seriously, you have to understand where your results are going to come from. You see here, a little GIF we have, business plan with that up and down curve going. But we want to make certain we try and flatten that out as much as possible on the way up. It's going up flatly. We don't want a whole lot of coming down, but it does happen. But we have to be able to measure our lead generation process beyond that in order to do so. So lead generation starts. We measure there, set up, we target market, we figure out what type of marketing we're going to do, and we set the measurement in place before we even start generating the leads. We measure or set up the measurement first. Unless you understand, how many calls you're making, how many online ads you're running that are producing a certain amount of what have you, or how many text messages you sent out that actually brought in a certain amount of leads. Unless you're measuring how many is leading to that lead that you're bringing in, you have no idea what you need to do to scale. You have no idea what numbers you need to increase or adjust to in order to scale. What do I mean by that? We typically talk about doing more deals. We talk about doing more, more profit, more deals typically. So we actually have to make sense in regards to what we're putting out for our results. And how many times have people been frustrated and say, "Oh man, real estate doesn't work. I put out all these mailers and I got like 10 calls. It doesn't work." Well, what did you measure? Did you measure maybe different postcard? Did you measure, there's just so many different things you can measure. If that is your lead channel, you measure exactly what works. You figure out exactly which of those particular tweaks are going to increase that lead flow. And you measure how much that costs, because you want to know, is it worth it? Am I increasing my profits by increasing the amount of cold calls I can make, or text messages I can send, or direct mail I can send? Am I actually increasing my profit, my bottom line, by increasing this? Because if not, then there's a broken process. That puzzle piece is missing. That, it may be the conversion. I'm going to get to that in a second. Lena says batting swing makes sense. So figuring out where my bottleneck is makes sense. Absolutely. You got to figure out where your bottleneck is. Could be a person, could be a process, could be a tool. All depends. Figuring out that bottleneck, once you have that information to be able to analyze the data, is where you're going to really profit from over the long term. Short term, it may suck because you may be putting out some capital to get that data to understand exactly where the tweaks are needed. But when you do figure it out, now you have a recipe for success. You have the numbers to move forward. You have a map to go forward with. Looks like we're getting a little late in the hour. I want to make sure we get this covered and get some good Q&A. You guys have some great questions. Keep them coming. For those that are joining us late, you definitely have to, catch the replay. Good information here. All right, so moving forward, let's talk about turning no's into yeses. What does this have to do with your KPIs, your key performance indicators? Well, if you look here, we have 3 initial, meaning first time you know, unless you're pulling all your, deals yourself, even if, well, actually, let me back that up. Even if you are doing all the entire process yourself, there's still an initial contact. There's still an initial meeting, whether that's, over the phone. I'm sorry, not if that's in person or even a Zoom call or what have you. There's still an initial meeting where you're kind of trying to fill them out. They've contacted someone initially. Maybe it's a virtual assistant. Maybe it's a tech service. Maybe it's, somewhere. It's initial, so you have to build some rapport. Initial meeting. Maybe you have to build some more rapport on site, over in the property. Initial offer. So you're always kind of building up to a next initial. We have to measure that. We have to understand how are we converting from our contact to an actual, hey, let me come and see your house versus, nah, you know what, we're just not interested in working with you. Or your offers, your softball offers, just, never mind, I don't want to even come out. You have to understand how to turn those no's into yeses. But more importantly, we need to know how many no's lead to a yes as well. You have to measure and track that and figure out, okay, well, I talked to 50 people based on these leads that came in, and we got about 10 appointments, and, hey, at least 4 of them are interested in our offer. Besides the appointment, we got to know those numbers, because then we can reapply it to our business. We can, take away the frustration. We can, as Lena say, get up to bat more often, because we know, hey, guess what? We need at least 10 pitches for us to be able to get a single. I don't know what batting averages that is. I'm not a baseball guy, but you know what I mean. You got to understand what that looks like for you. What does that number look like for you? What is it? What is the data telling you that, hey, this is what your business looks like? Now, can you tweak that? Can you bring in a Babe Ruth, or, a Willie Mays, or, a swinger that's going to knock it out of the park? Instead of every, 10 times like you, he's knocking it out every 4 times. That may be the bottleneck. Evan, I'm generating a ton of leads. I'm going on a lot of appointments or submitting a lot of offers, but I'm not getting anything accepted. Maybe you need a Willie Mays to come in, who's a pro at closing. Just maybe. But until you understand the measurement of your data, until you figure out this is where we're stuck at, you never know. You have to understand, by setting up from the beginning, you set yourself up for success by doing that. So let's cover what we've, let's do a brief recap what we covered, and we'll talk about the factors to consider and open it up for Q&A. So again, we're figuring out the puzzle pieces. What exactly do we need in terms of understanding the indicators that are going to tell us exactly where our business is, how healthy the business is? The right traffic funneled into that process produces results. So we need to understand, what pieces are we measuring? What's that 5 + 5 that's going to give us that 10? This, again, think of it as a scoreboard. You have to figure out what your scoreboard looks like in order for you to put up points. It's going to win the game for you.